Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Richest Men in Town podcast. I'm Mike Freeman, and along with my good friend and co-host Tyler Gould, we're excited to welcome you to our little podcast project. Tyler and I are just a couple of middle-aged husbands and dads driven to live our best lives. We want to be better every day, so here we'll be sitting down with great people. Not famous people, but great people that we admire, to learn their secret to living the rich life. Probably not the rich life you're thinking of. Our guests come in humbled and surprised at the invitation and hopefully leave feeling proud and grateful, realizing just how good they really have it. So pull up a chair, stay a while, and raise a glass with us as we toast our guests to the richest men in town.
Mike Freeman, what a good night tonight was.
That's what I'm talking about, Tyler Gould. How are you, man?
I am doing fantastic. You know, here's the thing. I'm doing good, even given the fact that I just spent a couple hours with an Olympic athlete that made me question my whole my whole approach to life.
When you think, right? You think, okay, I'm a successful guy. I got some stuff going on. I got a spelling bee trophy up in the attic, right?
Right.
And then you hang out with Sara Hall, and she kind of lets you in on her life with Ryan Hall and you know, their girls, and man, it was a treat. And it was eye-opening. And there were definitely some things like when she starts talking about mining her life for potential, you know, and like digging deep and trying to find your limits and trying to exceed them. I'm thinking, come on, Freeman, you can jog 2 miles. You know, she shares out. She's in this interesting stage in her career where she's 37, about to be 38, and she's having the best career she's ever had as a professional runner.
Yeah, I really think she lets us in on the mental and the spiritual component of her craft, right? She definitely talks a lot about, you know, her training and sort of the components of that, but I think, you know, she spends the bulk of our time together talking about her mental approach and her spiritual approach to not only her craft as a world-class athlete, but also as a mom, as a wife, as a woman of God.
And those pressures are real in all aspects of her life. In every role, she feels pressure, right? Pressure to perform, anxiety, doubt, fear. We talk about that fear of failure, and really she gets to a pretty low place professionally, and she basically in that moment realizes truly in her heart that God has unconditional love for her, and that liberates her. Yeah, it liberates her to perform better. It liberates her to start exploring being a mom, and she's in a really great place. And I think that internal voice, that doubt, right? The you're not good enough, or in her particular case, online commentary and haters, and you know, just people criticizing and saying, hang him up, you're done. I love it. She said, I've had so many people tell me so many times I'm done, and only I know when I'm done.
Yeah,
I'll know when I'm done. As long as I've still got passion to do it, I'm going to do it. And that's the lesson she's teaching her kids. And I love it. Love it.
Yeah, I thought it was great. She talked tonight about, you know, some of the epic failures that she's had in her career. She talked tonight about some of the great successes that she's had in her career. And then I thought it was a beautiful moment when she talked about inviting her kids into the whole process and letting them see her fail and letting them see her get back up, letting them see her recover and become even better and greater from the failure. And you know, if we had to talk about what this show is about, I think that's part of it, right? Mm-hmm. Learning from our failures, getting up and trying to become better. And Sara Hall, you know, gave us a great glimpse of what that looks like from an athlete, but from a woman who is striving to be the best that she can be in all aspects of her life.
And from a young girl who's just driven by a hunger for God, a love for God that has always been there. It was in her home. It was in her heart early on. And she's always kind of felt like that is why she's here, right? To do her best for God. And God is interested in the things that bring her joy. So therefore, run.
Yeah, what a cool experience tonight. I'm grateful for the time that we had with Sara Hall. I'm grateful for you for the introduction to Sara Hall. What a treat it was to spend some time with her and learn about some lessons that, look, I'm the first to admit, Mike Freeman, I am not a runner, but I learned some things tonight about life from a runner, and it was a great experience.
Yeah, I told you in the text exchange leading up to the show, runners are deep people for whatever reason. Every guy I know, every woman I know that's run 26.2, there's some depth to those people. And nobody in the world runs 26.2 better than Sara Hall. So we can definitely learn lessons that will help us, be better accountants and lawyers and husbands and dads. So I want to thank Sara for showing up.
Absolutely. I hope our listeners tonight find some truths that Sara Hall brings to them. She certainly invites them into the whole process. So take notes, do something about what you learned tonight from our first Olympic guest, Sara Hall, on The Richest Men in Town.
Do you let your kids win?
Yeah, when they were young, I'd let them win. As they get older and they start to have that competitive fire, with Quinn, for sure, I would have to show him every so often that this is why I'm boss and I'm still boss. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there were a couple of times though. There were a couple of times where it'd be like, okay, I'm going to let him, and then I'm going to take it back from him and put this thing away. And then as Abe got older, it's like, you can't necessarily just switch a gear.
Yeah.
and start closing this thing out.
Well, and my son is hyper competitive, and and so there were times where I knew I just had to let it go, or else the whole night was just destroyed.
Yeah, I remember the first time Abe and I went and played tennis, and he was learning how to play tennis. He might have been 8th grade, right?
Yeah.
7th or 8th grade, and like we go 6-0, 6-0, and he's like pissed.
Yeah.
he's pouting, and I'm like,
totally.
What did you think was going to happen here?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, hey, young grasshopper, I can teach you some things. And I don't know if he thought he was going to win, or B, I was going to maybe let him score some points. But it's like, look,
it's forever hopeful, man. And there's a time where it just becomes, it just flips over. It's like, playing basketball with Quinn. It's like, at some point you're just like, all right, maybe they're getting to that point where it's going to be, you got to try really hard to stick it to them, But to answer your question, yeah, I'll try to trounce my kids if I could.
Well, okay, so Tyler Gould, I'm excited to introduce you to Sara Hall.
Yeah.
Okay. Sara Hall, we go way back a little bit. I was an administrator for the Halls and their family here in Redding, California, and then they took off and they left us, and we'll give her a hard time about that. They moved off to Arizona. But some of our listeners may recognize Sara Hall. If you are a marathon runner, if you're into that, you're going to recognize Sara Hall as an Olympic athlete, right? As a world-class marathon runner, record holder, all kinds of things. We're going to bring her in as a mom, as a wife, and we might even, talk a little bit about running. But I'm probably going to be introducing you, Tyler, to the most competitive person you or I will ever meet.
I'm excited about. I like to talk to people that have got that fire. So let's open the doors.
Let's let her in here, and
let's do it.
Sara Hall, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you guys?
Good. Greetings from California, Redding, California. For me, I'd like to introduce you to Tyler Gould.
Hi,
nice
Sarah.
to meet you, Tyler.
Nice
are you in Redding as well?
I am in San Diego.
Oh, okay, cool.
And Sarah, you're coming to us from Arizona.
I'm in Flagstaff right now. So yeah, I'm on audio only because I'm in the woods where we live. It's not the best connection. So let me know if you can't hear me.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
We can hear you
Flagstaff
good.
sounds very woody.
It is. Yeah, we're at 7,000 feet elevation in the forest. And people don't know that Arizona has a ski resort. But up here, we actually get snow and it's mountainous.
Nice. It's
Wait,
beautiful up there.
so there's not snow on the ground right now, though, right?
There's a little bit. It pretty much all just melted, but we got some less than a week ago, surprisingly. So yeah.
Wow. Well, I thought I was having a San Diego and an Arizona kind of day because I'm here in Redding and it's like 85 degrees today. It's gorgeous.
Oh, it sounds about right. We miss it there.
Well, Redding misses you, Sara Hall. So we're excited to have you here on the Richest Men in Town. I've told Tyler a little bit about your backstory with how we met through Grant School and the girls. How are the girls doing? First, let's start there.
The girls are doing really well. I just, as I drove down the hill to do this, saw Jasmine riding her bike back from soccer. Her and Lily are going to Basis. It's a charter school here that's really rigorous, and they're doing well, learning Latin and Mandarin and all kinds of stuff.
Wow.
And doing some sports. But Mia's our one that's really into sports. She's following after Hannah and also became a state champion in cross country last fall. So that's been neat to see her just enjoy running, and that's something that I get to share with her as well, which is really special. And obviously they're both really talented at it. Coming from Ethiopia, having the genes for it for sure.
Well, let me get some ages because it's been a little bit. So how old is Hannah?
Hannah is 20.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
She is a freshman at Grand Canyon University, which is pretty amazing that she became able to go to college. You know, you met her when she
let's back that up. So Tyler, I met Sarah and her husband Ryan when they came to the school where I was a superintendent principal, and they had recently adopted 4 girls from Ethiopia.
Awesome.
And so, Sarah, how long ago was that? That was probably like 2016, 2015?
Yeah, 2015 fall, and I think we started at Grant in 2016 spring.
Right.
Yeah.
So 4 girls, English language learners, obviously, I mean, coming from Ethiopia. And so here we are now, we're talking high school state champs in cross country and college student. That's a pretty phenomenal journey.
Yeah, it's I think kind of every step of our parenting journey was like kind of throwing them into things that probably they weren't ready for, but just seeing like how they adapted and how they could handle it. And they ended up really surprising us kind of at every stage. And, I would have never thought Hannah would be able to go to college, like starting school for the first time in midway through 8th grade at Grant, and not knowing any English or any kind of basic math or anything, but and never going to school in Ethiopia. That was the other main thing. Like they just they didn't know how to even read in their mother tongue or write or anything. And so yeah, it's wild to see just how adaptable kids are, and how, when you believe in them and like you don't coddle them and you kind of stretch them, that they can really rise to the occasion. And I'm sure you've seen that a lot in education. But yeah, but
nothing like that, right? Coming from no organized school structure background and jumping into school, and I commend you for the work you're doing there. How old's Mia?
Mia is 17 now.
17.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned Jasmine. How old's Jasmine?
She is I like mix up their ages, 13. And Lily is 10.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. So I don't know if Sarah, if you are a fan of I don't know if you're a fan of It's a Wonderful Life with George Bailey.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, cool. Well, this podcast, Tyler and I, we're reaching out to folks because we're just a couple of dads, a couple of husbands trying to be the best that we can be. And we are looking for those folks that can teach us some things about being the best. And so we thought, why not call up a couple of Olympic athletes, right? So we can have a conversation about what parenting and what life is teaching the Halls these days. So Sarah, we're excited to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me.
Mike, let me ask you a question real quick, Sarah. I'm curious. I mean, you have 4 kids. That's busy time, right? Life is busy, and not to mention, we'll talk about your background and how busy that can be. But you said something that I thought was interesting. You said that you had to throw them into things to see how they adapt, right? What is that? Is that a philosophy that you espouse yourself, or is that something that you look at and say, well, I here's my kids, I want them to be able to progress, and so this is the way that we're going to do it? Or is this something that you've experienced yourself?
A little bit, I think. Yeah, I think I was always kind of a high achieving personality growing up, but definitely someone like not afraid to have big goals and kind of set my sights ahead of where I was at the time. And so so it was kind of the like, why not me, so yeah, I think, and even now, like as I approach my career and stuff, I've done a lot of, I've kind of taken a different path in a lot of ways from other professional runners. And I think it's just kind of that not being afraid to fail, but kind of embracing challenge. And that's something I've tried to model to the kids, because they've had to really have that same mentality as they, went out to school for the first time without being able to speak the language or know anyone and
some
stuff.
Scary
so I
moments.
Think, yeah, but just being like acknowledging the challenge, and not, I think that we tried to check in with them, and you don't want to be like overwhelming your kids and stuff, but I think also like not shying away from that, but like seeing what your limits are, I guess.
Sarah, thinking back as a kid, can you remember the first time you accomplished something that you had set as a goal? Is there anything that stands out to you?
Yeah, I was mainly in like team sports growing up, which I think is great for kids when they're younger to start that way versus like individual sports like running. But I'm trying to remember when the first time I had like a tangible goal. Like I won the state championship my freshman year of high school, but I wouldn't say even at that point, like I had that as a goal. Like I was kind of naively just like out there competing, and no one really was giving me much instruction. I was kind of just running, and I won the cross country state championship and the mile and the 2 mile. And I think it was really the next year, because I made it to the national championships on a fluke. But getting there to the national championships, like I was like, I want to win this race one day, and I kind of became obsessed with winning that race before the end of high school. So I think that's the first like tangible goal I remember.
You naively won state championships in 3 different events.
Like I was always really driven like in the training, and so I started training the summer before my freshman year of high school, and our coach kind of gave out these generic mileage plans. It was like beginning, intermediate, or advanced. And I was like, well, I want to be good, so I'm just going to do the advanced plan. But it had me like running like 16-mile long runs and like all this stuff that I was not ready for at all. But my body adapted to it. And so yeah, my early wins were really just like I'd kind of been doing a lot more mileage and stuff than most high schoolers really did. And so it was like what I lacked in experience, like I kind of had made up just in the hard work and the fitness and stuff. It was more later that I had to really to make it to the next level and stuff, had to really like know what I was doing and stuff. But at first, yeah, it was fun because there was no pressure, and it was just like I was surprising myself every time out, kind of.
Do you remember the first time you ran?
Yeah. Our church had this program called AWANA, Approved Workmen Are Not Ashamed, I think it stands for, but it was like a Bible memory verse program, but then they had the Awana Olympics every year. And it was like these different races and games that were played around this circle. And I was so into it. Like, it was my first kind of experience running around a track, even though it's like this little circle drawn around like a gym floor. And I was really, really into that every year. And then, but it was, the summer before my 7th grade year that I decided I was going to do cross country in 7th grade. And I started training that summer for cross country, even though most incoming 7th graders like don't train over the summer for it. But like, that was just kind of my personality. And I found I just loved exploring the trails across the street from my house.
Where did you grow up? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Santa Rosa, California. So Northern California, pretty similar to Redding in topography and beautiful trails and stuff. And I think that's a lot of what made me a runner, was just, I loved being in nature. I grew up across the street from a massive state park. And I'm not sure if I would have found running if it wasn't for that. So I'm thankful to my parents for that.
So Sarah, you're throwing out some phrases like hard work. You said you wanted to see what your limits are. You mentioned, why not me? What can you talk? Can we rewind a little bit and talk about what it was like growing up in your house and sort of the lessons and things that you learned from your family as a child?
Sure. Yeah. It's funny because, I think people from the outside thought my parents must have been really overbearing or something, because my sister and I ended up, she went to Harvard, PhD and stuff. And then, but they weren't really that way. Like they definitely encouraged us to work hard and like do your best. Like, it wasn't necessarily about like performance as much as your best effort, Mm-hmm. And I think there's a Bible verse, Colossians 3:23, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for men. And that was, I would say, kind of like a family motto, where it was about giving your best effort, like doing it unto the Lord, and not as much for like maybe this external validation from people or grades or anything else. But if I didn't get very bad grades ever, but if I did, they'd kind of be like, well, did you do your best? And so yeah, I mean, I think there was good and bad things. Like, I think it did set me up somewhat in my faith. I feel like, to have a bit of a performance mentality, and some of that might have just been my personality, where it was like still kind of like doing your best, like for God, versus just like, and that's maybe a whole rabbit trail we could go down. But yeah, I would say in general, like, it was they were really good at letting me, they could tell I was intrinsically motivated. And so they didn't really have to like push me. I think they just, they were good at just like even holding me back in a way, especially running early on. They didn't let me do a bunch of the opportunities that were available, because they kind of wanted to like pace me in the sport and stuff. So yeah, they did a good job.
I love it. You mentioned you had a sister that went to Harvard. Do you have any other siblings?
I do. I have a younger brother who's 5.5 years younger.
Okay.
And so where did this faith come from? Like, what did faith look like growing up? Did you guys go to church? What did it feel like in the home, and how did it stick?
Yeah, faith was a big part of our family. My mom grew up in a Christian home, and my dad did not. They were kind of like traditional Catholics that would go kind of on holidays or things, but he actually came to have a really strong Christian faith in college. My parents both met at Stanford, and so that was something, by the time they met, that they shared and really wanted to raise us in a Christian home. And we always went to church, never really missed that. And it was a really like solid Bible believing church, and really community focused. And we didn't talk a lot about faith stuff necessarily like at home, but it was definitely like family values as a family were like very Bible centered. And Christmas was like very much about like Jesus. It wasn't about Santa ever, or things like that. And I think yeah, I definitely saw in my parents' life, like that was a really big, that was their entire internal compass, was the Bible and God, and praying about decisions and things like that. And so they've really passed that down to me, I think.
So where, as you think back and look back on growing up, where did it become yours and not theirs? Right? Can you point to a moment, or can you point to an experience where maybe you stood on your own 2 feet when it came to faith in Jesus Christ, and maybe where the Bible became something more than just something mom and dad always talked about?
I raised my hand to accept Jesus at 4 years old in Sunday school. And I never really remember a time not having a hunger for God. So I think some of that was it was probably both nature and nurture. Like, I think that was nurtured, but also I think I just naturally have like a hunger for spiritual things. And I remember, like, I was reading the Bible like really early on, like third, fourth grade, just on my own, wanting to know more, wanting to read the whole Bible and would multiple times over, and had my own time with God. And a lot of that, what it looked like from my tradition at the time, was like Bible study was kind of like how you spent time with God. And it was a little bit more structured and stuff than what I would do now. But yeah, I think I remember just like hiking up on like hillsides and just being like, God, I'm gonna wait here for you until you speak to me. And I was in high school and like just really, really genuinely like wanted to know him, and but also wanted to really serve him and do, like, obey his commandments, obey like the way that he laid out for us to live through Jesus's life. I just remember always being like that, I guess. So I don't know if there's ever like a shift, but I also had a really great youth group, which I really credit my youth group leader, because that was my entire like social life in high school was doing stuff surrounded by Christian community. And I think that just like kept me from ever wandering from my faith or like getting in trouble or anything, because all my friends were just kind of wanting the same things and wanting good, clean fun and just like in it together. So yeah, it was a great environment to be raised, for sure.
Well, as you think about your parents now, how do you honor them? How do you honor your mom and dad today?
It's a good question. I think being a mom, like, realize how selfless it is, and my mom even more so. Like, she didn't work the whole time we were in the home, and she said that when we were young, she would like get up every day and just be like so excited to what new things she could expose us to that day and stuff. And like, she was just like a mom that, more than anyone I've met, like, motherhood was like an art, and she really, I think like we're the product of that, like my siblings being happy and thriving in what we're doing and stuff. And so, but now being a mom, like, I realize how hard that is. Like I'm not invested only in my kids, like that. And so I think I really honor her willingness to do that, and her just delight in us. I'm really grateful for that. And my dad too, I think, he didn't really have a model for a healthy family growing up. He kind of grew up alone, more or less. And so I just look at like his value for family, and a lot was working to provide for us and provide, for whatever opportunities we wanted to pursue, like running, but also like being present in the ways that like he didn't have a parent present in his life, and coaching my basketball team every year, and never missing like one of my sports events or things like that. And so yeah, I'm really grateful for them.
So Sarah, you talk a little bit about your parents and your siblings, and we've talked a little bit about some of the early successes that you had in running. What happens next after you win these high school competitions and things are going there? Where do you end up next?
Yeah, well, high school, it started out really winning those state championships as a freshman, but I started to have some rockier periods like as high school went on, and definitely started to feel the pressure to perform. All of a sudden the internet was becoming a big thing, and running websites with like anonymous message boards that I stumbled upon. And I realized people were like criticizing me if I failed in a race. And it was kind of like, we all are wired to want like love and acceptance and connection from people. And just starting to see that you could lose that by failing. And so that started to kind of be the seed of the fear of failure in my life. And that was something I would go on to battle for like many years. And eventually was able to address like through my faith. But yeah, I would say in high school, like it started out really, you know, nothing to lose and like having success but then later like really had to deal with pressure, deal with expectations, deal with being afraid to fail. But thankfully I did have kind of the happy ending at the end of high school that it took me all the way to my senior year, but I eventually did win that Foot Locker national championship that I dreamed of. And it was a really special moment because I'd kind of overcome a lot to get to that point.
Sara, can you talk for a second about fear of failure? I mean, I don't, it's interesting because I think obviously, that's not a unique thought to you, right? There's probably a lot of people that have had that thought. And I think there's, we're probably safe to say there's people that have not been able to overcome that, right? And have struggled with that idea of maybe not being able to reach their potential or letting someone down. So therefore they don't get to the place where they can even start. Can you talk for just a little bit about what that obstacle was for you and what it was like to overcome that?
Yeah, for me, I think I'm like a very performance oriented person. I don't know if you've done the Enneagram, but I'm like a 3, like the achiever,
Mm-hmm.
that's like that. I mean, you can probably hear it in what I've already said, but like definitely my performances have always like really mattered to me, and I've put a lot into them. And I think so it started in high school, but it just increased with each year. So in college I was on scholarship, and that's kind of like being paid to perform, and so now all of a sudden expectation went up another level, because it's like you're not just doing this for you, like in high school. You're actually like they're expecting you to deliver on their investment in you. And then you become a professional, and it's like even more so, like that's your job to perform, and but you know what, our bodies, they're not machines. Like as much as we'd love for them to just be a robot and do exactly what we want them to do, like it'd be hard to figure out at times. And I went through some pretty difficult, like some difficult years in college, and then early on professionally too, when I was going through those struggles, like the anxiety was just increasing, because I felt like I was letting people down. I felt like I was letting my coaches down, my sponsors. I was feeling like I knew what the criticism, being just under the public eye, like if you had a bad race, how you would be criticized and torn apart anonymously by people. And so, yeah, that I think it just compounded. And I think it was hard because like I was putting more into it, right? Like I think you kind of double down, like when you're trying to succeed at something but failing, and it's your job to succeed, like it just makes you try harder. But sometimes that's like counterproductive. Like that's part of the problem, is actually you need like rest or recovery. And it's a long story, but really it kind of came to a head where I failed a lot. It's a miracle I was still sponsored by my sponsor ASICS at the time, because in 2009, like I got last, I think, in the US national championship on the track, and was just not performing at the level of a professional athlete. And it just like kind of brought me to the end of my own strength. I think I just experienced success for so long, and it kind of came easy, and I really enjoyed the hard work. And I think I was confident in my ability for so long, but it really brought me to a point of weakness of like, I'm doing everything I can and I'm getting worse, and so, but God really used that moment. Like, I think he just needed me to be at that point to really meet me And it was at that point that I experienced his unconditional love in a way I never had. I'd always heard at like an intellectual level, like I knew about the unconditional love of God. But I think it takes like those moments where you're just dependent so much on him for it to go from your head to your heart. And that's what it was for me. That in that moment, like God really met me, and I experienced his love in a way I never had, even though I knew about it my whole life. And I started to realize how there's nothing we can do that would make God love us any less. No failure, nothing. And there's also nothing we could do that would make him love us more. Like if we win more or anything, he doesn't love us anymore. And he just loves us because he loves us, and he created us, and he just delights in watching us do the things he created us to do, like no matter what place it is or how fast it is. And so, yeah, that was just so healing to me. That was exactly what I needed to kind of confront that fear head on.
Sarah, not everyone is doing what you're doing, right? Maybe not pushing to the limits that you're pushing, but they are being pushed. And as Tyler was saying, that fear of failure is not a unique thing. As we talk to people, it's probably the most common fear of the people that we talk to on this program. And so to the person that is racked with that anxiety, to the person that is having a hard time transferring from the head to the heart, that understanding that God loves them, what would you say? What could they do?
I think it's a really personal journey, but definitely reaching out to God in that place. The Bible says perfect love casts out fear. So it's like the more love you're filled with from God, from other people that love you unconditionally. I experienced a lot of love from my husband. Because even during this time, like even family members were kind of like, why is Sarah still running? Like, she should just be supporting you, Ryan. And I was getting a lot of that, felt like rejection to me, even from close family members. And but my husband was really unconditionally loving as well, really supportive. And so, yeah, I would say just plugging into the love of God. For me, that's like resting and receiving it, like just in prayer. But also you can read about God's love in the Bible and his unconditional love and what that looks like. And I think for me, it was a snowballing effect, right? Like I think I just started that love displaced some of the fear, and I was able to feel a little bit more free the next time out. And then if I failed again, like I was like, you know what, I've already been here before. Like, I'm not going to die. There's always another race, and I'm not even going to remember this race a few years from now. And so like snowballed the other way, where the more free I got, the easier it was to get even more freed up in that area and to take risks again and to put myself out there, because I just kind of gained momentum in that area. And I think you realize you're able to get greater perspective, where you're like, okay, yeah, I failed, but there's another race. I'm going to be bummed for the day, and then I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to remember why I do what I do and how much I love it. And I'm just going to have really short-term memory with that and just like keep moving forward. And yeah, it's kind of like a muscle, I guess, that you it gets stronger as you use it.
Yeah, I love that. What did you say? I mean, we've all got that internal voice, right? That self-talk. How do you overcome doubt?
Good question. I think that's something I've tried to be intentional, especially I think we have those doubts in our head. I think what I especially nip in the bud is what I speak out loud. That's something I learned from my pastor in Reading, Chris Valaton, is how our words are powerful, and like what we speak over ourselves actually like changes us, and so especially when I start to like vocalize doubts, or like, I think a lot of times it comes in the form of sarcasm or kind of joking, where you're like, oh, I'm terrible at this, or oh, I'm probably going to bomb this, or something like that. Just kind of joking around it, I think, can be cultural. But I've really tried not to do that at all, and really only speak life over myself. And I've noticed a difference with that, especially even as now I'm turning 38 next month, or this month, or next April. And that's really rare to be running your fastest at 38. But one thing I've just tried not to do is ever to say I'm old. Like, I'm not going to say, like, joke about being old or use the grandma emoji, or like a lot of things that you see athletes do where they're like, oh, my, that felt fast because I'm old. Like, I'm like, no, like, I'm, nothing about me feels old. So I'm not going to like speak that over myself. And yeah. So anyways, I think that's part of it. It's hard to control all your thoughts, like, for sure. I think yeah, it's easier to control what you say.
Well, Sarah, can I ask this $1 million question then? Number one, I didn't ask you how old you were. I want to say for the record that you volunteered that information, right? As a gentleman, a gentleman never would. But since you did offer that up, I want to throw this question out there. How is it? You said yourself, our bodies aren't machines. How is it that you are running your best right now?
I'm not exactly sure. I think part of it is what I just mentioned, but just part of it. I mean, at some point, no matter what my attitude is, like, I'm going to slow down,
Right.
And that's just reality. But, I think some of it was I just how my training went early on as a pro. I think I left some kind of mileage on my tires, so to speak, because I kind of got a little too focused on the speed work and not enough mileage in my track career, which was one of the reasons I think I didn't do very well during those periods I mentioned. So I think it left a little bit of room to grow my aerobic capacity, which I didn't know about when we adopted our kids. Like, I thought I probably was on the tail end of my career, and I didn't know what they were going to need. Most of the families we'd talked to that had adopted older kids from Ethiopia, like, it was very life altering, and they were like, you're not going to be able to do this career anymore, just so you know, like, you need to be like in a position to be ready for that. And so I was, like, for them, like, I think I didn't want to be, but I was willing. But yeah, surprisingly, I think I've discovered some different ways to kind of grow my aerobic capacity without the pounding, and just tried some kind of outside the box things that I think have helped me to continue to make gains while also avoiding injuries. But yeah, it's taken some outside the box thinking, for sure.
There's lots of places I could go with this, and I'm curious about your decision to adopt 4 girls from Ethiopia. Could you walk us through that decision? Could you walk us through here? I mean, you and your husband have a life, right? You have professional athlete careers. Can you walk us through that?
I had always wanted to adopt internationally from a young age. I had a lot of adopted cousins, and it was kind of normal in my family, and it was not really on Ryan's grid at all. That was kind of my plan A, was to grow our family through adoption, but we figured we would start with one baby. And we, I traveled in Africa already because my sister does malaria research. And so I visited her in some different countries, and you see the orphan crisis over there. And obviously international adoption isn't the solution to that, but for a few kids it could be, and I think that just naturally, like, pulls on your heart when you're there. And so we decided on Ethiopia, and we were just going to adopt one baby since it was our first kid. And even at that point, I was not quite ready to be a mom yet. I was just starting to assess professionally than I had been having. And as I mentioned, I had a lot of struggle, but Ryan was at a different place in his career. He was kind of winding down and really feeling the pull to have a family. And so, but as we started the process, we spent some time over in Ethiopia, and we saw the older kids in the orphanages, and they pretty much would get stuck after age 3. Like, the chances of being adopted were really slim. And we were like, man, we would adopt any of these kids. Like, they're wonderful. And so God kind of opened up our hearts through a number of circumstances to instead consider older kids. And we heard about our girls from like a Facebook group, surprisingly, for people that are in the process to adopt from Ethiopia. And they'd been waiting for a family for 3 years. And so, you know, at like a mental level, you're like, I would love to give these girls a home. Like, we have the space and we don't have kids yet, so it's easier. And but for me, I was like, man, this could be like the end of the world as we know it. Like, we have no idea what we're getting ourselves into. And it sounds sad now, like knowing my kids, but at the time, like, I just, you know, I didn't know them, and I didn't know. It's like adoption is like signing the bottom of a blank contract where you don't know what it's going to entail. You know, it's like, come what may, like, you're
times 4, right? Come what may times 4.
We're both a little bit of impulsive people. And I think also just like taking on challenges. We're used to going after big things and not being afraid. And so I think there are certain things of how we're wired that maybe made us more like willing to entertain this idea than most people. Hard to be a professional athlete and take it on, for sure. And so definitely had to like count the cost. And I wouldn't say like I felt like a clear word from God on it. I just felt like a freedom to choose. And it very much was a choice. Like, it was like, all right, we're just gonna like jump off this cliff and like just figure it out as we go. And yeah, that's kind of how it was.
Sarah, Mike sent me this quote today that I think it's from you. All right. So I'm going to quote you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. All right. But this is, it says, when you're trying to be the best in the world at something, your life is never going to be balanced. And I'm listening to you talk about taking on these 4 girls and starting this family, and you're busy with your career, and you know, I'm sure your husband's busy with his career, and so now things are real busy, right? It's a whole new level of busy. So we learned from your quote that balance isn't there. So what does juggling look like? How do you make all of those things work?
Yeah, I think you nailed it with the juggling, because it isn't a balance, it's more of a juggle. That image just fits it better, where I try to be like all in on what I'm doing, like at the moment, right? So when I'm training, like, I try to arrange things so that the kids have what they need, and I'm not worried about them, and I'm not thinking about that, and I'm fully invested in what I'm doing in the moment, you know. And then when I'm home, like, it's a little trickier now. They're still doing school at home, but thankfully don't need as much from me right now. But yeah, I try to then be really present too, and not be still doing exercises or things, like trying to get that as much as possible done before they get home from school. But there's some blending there where, you know, before, a lot of my job isn't just the training, like it's the whole package of resting and recovery and nutrition. And that's been a big adjustment, because before I would train, and then I would go into like energy conserve mode, where like ideally you just like didn't get out of bed and like watch Netflix the whole rest of until you trained again, you know. Mm-hmm. And like,
I could be a professional athlete.
Mike got that part nailed.
Yeah, there's some upsides for sure, but no, I don't get to do that anymore. It's, you know, being a parent, you cannot go in energy conserve mode pretty much ever, and so that's taken a little, you know, that still is hard for me in some ways. Like, I know what it's like to be really dialed in with what I do, and sometimes I miss my old lifestyle because I was able to give more to my sport. As terrible as that sounds, like, I'm grateful for my kids and stuff, but you have those moments, right, where you're like you have a really big race coming up and you're like, man, I wish I could be resting more or whatever. But I've just tried to encourage myself, like, I'm still improving every year since becoming a mom. And so even though my life looks different from my competitors, like, it's working for me, and we're figuring it out.
That's great. I think that's, you know, I think that there's a lot of people now that can relate to the idea of juggling. Now, maybe not juggling an Olympic career and 4 children at the same time, but juggling nonetheless. And I think it's important to just, that we realize that, I think there's this thought that we have to strike a perfect balance in all things, and I loved your idea of I'm just whatever I'm in, if it's training or if it's being a mom, that's where I'm at. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people can learn from that. I love that. I love that thought. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, and Tyler, it kind of reminds me of the thought we had last episode when we were talking about getting a grip on it versus kind of going with the current.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And going with things, and 4 kids are going to take you different places, and being into what they're into and being supportive of them. And it sounds like they're into some things that you're into, and maybe they've got some interests that are new to you, right?
Definitely. Yeah. My Jasmine wants to be a Hollywood actress / model / singer.
Okay,
and so that's like really off my grid. And she's like, Mom, can I do this audition in LA? And I'm kind of like, I'm not sure you're at that place yet. But yeah, but I think it'll be a fun adventure with her. It's going to stretch me. Absolutely.
Well, and I want to give credit really quick. Tyler dropped that quote. That quote was from your Runner's World article. And I really appreciated having the chance to read about that even before the podcast, right? Just following Ryan and Sara Hall and your girls, because here in Reading, we love you guys. And it was great to read that article. But, it's interesting to know you and Ryan as parents of your girls, but you're kind of a big deal in that running world, Sara Hall, right? Like it was running's power couple. So
yeah,
can you tell me a little bit about how you met Ryan? Go back in time and walk us through that.
I met Ryan in high school. We were seniors in high school, and he grew up in Big Bear Lake, California, so other opposite end of California than me. But I saw that sometimes at the state meet, or kids will ask for autographs for the top runners, and so I was signing an autograph, and I would always write a Bible verse, and I saw that he had signed his name with a Bible verse, and so I was like, oh, that's cool, because you didn't see that really ever. And I reached out to him over email and was just encouraged him in his faith, and we met later at another race in person, but he had a bad race, so it was he was like in a foul mood. It was not a great first impression. And he was pretty shy, and so even at the next race, the national championships, I didn't talk to him much. He was really introverted, but it was interesting because we both ended up committing to Stanford that February of our senior year, individually, obviously. And then that June, we were at the state track meet. And in between races, there was this park nearby, and I was kind of stretching, and he came up and we were chatting. And as he was leaving, like the clearest I've heard the voice of God in my life ever was in that moment. And he said, like, that's the man you're going to marry. And it wasn't like an audible voice, but it was just like a knowing. And that was not common for me at all. Like I had only dated one person, really short, and was like bored with him really quickly. And, like I did not like fall head over heels for boys ever. And so I was kind of like, whoa. And I didn't tell him that, obviously, but as we went to the preseason camp with Stanford before freshman year, I just kind of had my eye on him, obviously. And we just started to just get to know each other a little there. And then I could just see his hand through a relationship from the beginning. Like our dorms were right next to each other. And so we ended up walking everywhere together the first week of freshman year, and ended up having our first date that week. And we dated all 4 years of college and got married right after college. And it was very linear, and it felt just like, yeah, like the clearest I've ever felt something was God's will was like, I never questioned that with Ryan. Like it was really obvious.
Well, I one of the things I just want to pull again from that article, there was a runner that I think was quoted. I think she's a trainer. She was being trained by Ryan in the article. She said, Ryan's goals are Sara's goals, and Sara's goals are Ryan's goals. That sounds really easy in a marriage. How do you make that work?
yeah, it's been an evolution, because early on in our pro career, Ryan was the one really succeeding. He was setting American records, um and I was took more of a supporting role. And that was hard because I was used to being the star, to be honest. Like I was actually performing better than him most of college and in high school, and but then I was kind of struggling, and so I ended up, since he was the one really nailing it, like taking the brunt of things, like to support him. And that's hard when I was still competing, and I was still caring about, and if anything, you want to do more for yourself, right? To like try to get yourself in a better place. But yeah, it was, I think we've always kind of seen each other as a team. Like I was just very invested in his career and wanted his success even more than my own. And then it was neat to just feel the natural evolution of that change when he retired and then started coaching me and spending a lot of time training with me on the bike. And so it was almost like he was able to pay back in a way, like, and I think that's healthy. I feel like is always like one person supporting the other person. That isn't as healthy as there just being different seasons, right? Where it's like shifting and like you're constantly just kind of like, all right, like during the season, I'm gonna pick up the slack for you here, and then that's gonna, and that's kind of how it's been for us. Even now, like he has a lot of stuff going on too. But even though he's retired from running, and so it takes a lot of just communication and like just really like being for each other to like, yeah, just balance, or not balance, but more the juggle of, yeah, use lending support, but then being like, okay, now I really need your help here.
Okay, I gotta ask this question. Is there any instance when he's on that bike coaching you while you're running, yelling things at you that you're just done with him? Having your husband as your coach, and you're all out running and he's on a bike. Is there any time where it's just like, enough of this?
Yeah, well, we definitely have gotten in a fair amount of fights with him on the bike, and it's not like him being a slave driver. It's more like just how things can spiral in a marriage. Like my tone isn't very nice when I'm saying something, and then he snaps, and then and it just escalates. But it's tricky because I had a conversation recently about like, let's try to like more professional hats when we're together, because I think like that just wasn't like our role. Like I have a friend up here that she started as an athlete to her coach, now fiance, but like they started in that role, so it's easier for them to kind of like go back to how that was. But for us, like that was really ever who we were together, so we just bring our same selves to training now. But yeah, it can be tricky because it's really hard to, if you're having a fight at home, to like leave that at home and have like a successful training bout, in spite of it.
Do you remember the Bible verse you used to sign off on? Was it always the same?
Yeah, I would usually write Colossians 3:23, the one I quoted earlier. Mm-hmm. And Ryan would write Isaiah 40:31. Those who wait upon the Lord will renew their strength. They will mount up with wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. It is.
Love that. Yeah. Love that. Where you're at now in your life, in your personal life, in your career, is there anything that you could say you've learned the hard way? Any particular lesson that really stung, that really taught you something?
Failure part, I really wish I could have learned that a lot earlier, because I feel like I would have enjoyed so much more of my career if I had had a breakthrough with that and been able to identify it earlier.
Sara, we live in a world that's complicated, right? There's a lot of stuff going on all the time. I mean, some of that's our own doing, and some of that's just outside forces. But you're raising 4 daughters. You've got some athletes. You've got a future Hollywood movie star on your hands. Got all kinds of good stuff going on. But what is if there's something that you could instill in them, what would that be that you'd want them to take away as they grow up and get into adulthood?
I really hope that's what's been special about still doing this career with kids, because I never thought I would be a working mom or want to keep doing this with kids, but I still had a lot of passion for the sport, and just it didn't feel, and they transitioned so beautifully. It allowed me to keep doing it. Side that I see, as challenging as it is to juggle and stuff, the upside is I get to model stuff to them like in real time, and you know, with kids, more is like caught than taught.
Yeah.
Right, like they learn more through watching you do stuff than what you're kind of like preaching at them. And so, you know, I really hope my kids find something that makes them come alive. I think all kids need to see their parents like come alive doing something, you know, and not just kind of be slaves to the kids. Like which my mom, like, she came alive as a mom, like she like loved it so much, you know. But so it doesn't have to be like a career, but like I think just not like martyrdom, you know, like
Yeah.
I think like, and so I get to show my kids that like what it means to work hard for something, that do something excellently and serve God and serve other people through that. Like for me, I have a place of influence in my sphere, but you don't have to, you know, like you can do that in a local level or just and I think also just they've watched me fail like epically on like the biggest stages. They've watched me put my heart out there like over and over, and you know, just want something so bad, like making the Olympic marathon team a year ago, and I went in with the fastest time in the field, but got crushed by the course and dropped out a few miles from the finish line. And they saw how much I put into that race. They saw my disappointment. Like I invited them in to the whole process, you know, but then they saw me like pick myself back up and like continue to like train through a pandemic when there's no races and you have no idea when the next race will be. And then finally get my opportunity to race and then have the race of my life there. And so it's like that kind of stuff. Like I want to show them how to like pick yourself back up over and over, like never to be discouraged, like to just to just have short-term memory with your failures and just be resilient.
There's so much. There's 2 points I just want to make there, Sarah. You mentioned not making the Olympic trials there. At that stage in your career, you might have even have had people or the commentary of like, it's time to hang it up. How do you bounce back from that disappointment and continue on? And then the next question is, what the heck happened in London? Right? You refer to that as the race of your life. That video of you coming down the stretch, like it moves me to tears, right? And I don't even run. So how do you pick it up, and what happened in London?
Thanks. Yeah. Well, so back to the first question. I think that was really interesting, right? Because I think 37, like probably missed out on my last chance to make an Olympic team in the marathon. At least I'll have the track trials this summer, but yeah, if there was ever a time to kind of hit cruise control, it would have been then, because we hit the pandemic. Like everything in the near future was canceled. I have 4 kids. They're all doing school at home. Like if there's ever a time where you want to kind of wind down, like it seems like that would be the time. But similar to like I said, when we adopted, like I just still had so much passion for the sport and just felt like there was so much potential I hadn't seen yet come out. Like the trials race was not my best performance, like my best, everything I was capable of. Like I got thwarted by the hills in there and stuff, but I didn't really get to see what my potential was there. And so I was just motivated to keep mining that out, especially as you are like an older runner, like you don't know how many more years you have to improve. So I just still hit the gas and I'm like, I'm going to keep training in faith that there'll be an opportunity at some point. I don't know when, but I want to keep improving while I can keep improving. And so that was, it really made me realize how much passion I still have for the sport. And I think that's something only you can know your path, right? Like you said, people are probably like, I'm done. People have declared me done like so many times in my career. It's funny, but it's a good lesson of like, only you know when you're done, you know, don't let anyone else tell you when you're done. Like it's your path, you know. And then London, so I trained all through the pandemic, had my best marathon training, built upon all the strength I'd gained in my training for the Olympic trials, and heard that they were going to have a professional only field in this COVID bubble. They're basically the only marathon to happen during COVID last year. And I just jumped at the opportunity. I would like begged my agent to get me in, and thankfully they got me on the starting line. And yeah, the race, you know, honestly, it became my best race in my career, but it didn't look like that for a lot of the race. It was cold and rainy and windy, and I found myself completely running alone. Like there was a group of Kenyan and Ethiopian girls up ahead running with the world record holder, Bridget Kosgei. And then there was a gap, and then me, and then a gap, and the rest of the runners. And so you do not want to be running a marathon completely alone. Like you need other people to push you, and it's just so much easier to work together, especially when it's windy. And then because of COVID, there was no spectators allowed. So it was completely silent out there. And we're doing 1 mile loops in front of Buckingham Palace. So, which I've never run a marathon on like 1 mile loops before. And so it's kind of like the perfect storm of everything. If I had to design like case scenario for me, it would have been that. Plus throw in like a ton of hills. If you could add that in, then it would like definitely be like the worst case scenario. But so there was definitely like moments I was feeling sorry for myself out there. I was like, man, this is the worst place to be, and I'm so fit, and I'm just like completely running alone. But I was able to kind of slap myself in that moment and be like, you are so blessed to have this opportunity to race. Like no one gets to run a marathon right now during COVID. Like take advantage of this opportunity. You're in the best shape of your life. And then I just started kind of telling myself all the positive things, like they're going to come back to you. And but it was really that gratitude that kept me moving forward in the race. And eventually I did start catching people and moving up, and eventually moved into third. And then, in the final stretch, getting second place in that dramatic finish. And it made me realize afterwards, like, man, how many opportunities do we miss out on because we let discouragement win, you know, and like take us out of the race? Like what could have been our like biggest breakthrough. It was kind of a humbling moment for sure. But yeah, just really special because like on the bus on the way over there, I was like, man, I would love to do something inspiring today. Like it's just a time where everyone's struggling, and even if you're healthy and like people are struggling to just get out the door to run, stay motivated because there's no races and stuff. So it'd be great to be able to inspire people through my race. But it's just not something you can really manufacture. Like you kind of just go out there and do your best. But I really felt like it was a moment, preparation meeting opportunity, and God kind of created this moment where it all kind of came together, and so yeah, it was really special.
And then in December you posted 2:20.
Yeah, so as thrilled as I was for London, it was pretty much the best that race could have gone for me. I'd placed to run fast just with the conditions and running alone. And so we knew about this race happening in my home state of Arizona 11 weeks later. And it's kind of untraditional to run back-to-back marathons, but I was like, you know what? I don't know when the next marathon's going to be with COVID. Like, I just want to give it a shot. And so we decided to go for it and see if I could get the American record, which is 2:19:47 or something. And so I was a little bit short of that, but it was still a special day.
Okay. You mentioned back-to-back marathons. I have to ask, I know it's about Sara and it's not about Ryan, but the 7 marathons, 7 days, 7 continents.
Yeah.
Where did that come from, and how in the world was he able to do that?
Yeah, that was a special thing. Ryan heard about it from a pastor friend of his, that he had spoken at the Dream Center church in Angelus Temple in LA, and he was like, "Hey Ryan, I'm gonna do this crazy thing to raise money for the Dream Center, and you should join me." And Ryan at the time was like not even running, and so he was, but that just like sparked something in him. Ryan has always been someone that likes like epic challenges, and so yeah, he was like, "I'm in," even though he was like not running at all. And it ended up being a special thing because he kind of never got to say goodbye to the marathon in his career. He kind of had just failures and disappointments, injuries and things where he was dropping out for injuries. And so it was kind of a moment where on the last marathon in Sydney, he left his shoes on the finish line, and it was kind of a symbolic way of being like, that's my last marathon, I'm never going to run, and had some closure with his career.
So Sarah,
what's the best advice you've ever gotten, Sarah?
Oh man.
Coach, parent, youth leader?
Well, I think it's probably something Bill Johnson, my pastor from Reading, said. He said, "You become what you behold." And he's talking about it in relation to the more time we spend in God's presence, like the more we become like him, you know? And that's kind of the intention of spending time with God, is like we're made in his image, but it's like reflecting who he is. And but you could take that a lot of different ways too, right? Like how you see yourself, you know, and like you become like what you're putting in front of yourself, and like what you're most aware of and stuff. If you see yourself as, I'm just a sinner saved by grace, like you're going to keep sinning, you know? But if you see yourself as God's child, like made in his image, and then you're going to act that out too. And so, yeah, I would say that.
Sarah, what gives you hope today?
That's a good question. Well, it's obviously been a really challenging year in so many ways, but I think what I've loved is seeing people rise up and defend people that are marginalized, and and come together around things, like especially with the pandemic. It feels like a moment where people are more like our interconnectedness is becoming really we're more aware of it than ever. And just so many beautiful ways of people stepping up and being allies about, you know, matters of race, or like, I think there's like the downsides of all of these things, but also like the beautiful parts too, in the midst of it, of humanity, like caring for the people that are struggling all throughout these different things that have happened.
I love that answer. There's, you know, it's such a crazy time with the, you know, you mentioned all of the social things going on, and obviously we're in, hopefully coming to the tail end of a pandemic. Let's hope, right? But to celebrate people coming together, I mean, that's a beautiful thing, and that's a great image for talk about hope, right? To just see people come together and lift each other in the times where it's probably easiest to be to want to shrink from those tasks. So I love that thought. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, and it requires some courage on our part, right?
Yeah.
It requires some courage on our part to have hard conversations, to be okay with feeling uncomfortable and not knowing what to say, right? But showing up.
Yeah, I see a lot of people showing up. That's a good way to say it. Like in a lot of ways, whether it's like helping an elderly person that needs groceries but is like afraid to go into the grocery store because of COVID, or, you know, whatever it is. Like it's you see that humans are good, like that people do care. And
and I think that's the thing that needs to be amplified, because I think we do have forces at play, and media is going to tell a story. They got to sell a story, and unfortunately sometimes that that portrays some of the worst things about us, and there are good people doing good things. And if we can amplify that and actually join them, right, and be in those circles with good people doing good things, I think that's a great source for hope. Sarah, you talked a little bit about what you're hoping your girls learn from you. What are you learning from your girls?
Yeah, a lot. Like, they really have inspired me with so many things. Like, one, just how they embraced us from day one, like they didn't have to accept me as mom. Like, I looked like the same age as my oldest daughter, and like I'd be at Grant School and they thought I was like a student usually when I was there. But I think, like, they could be like, who is this girl? She's our mom now, what? Like, but they were amazing with how they embraced Ryan and they never questioned us as parents, or like, you're not our real parents, or any of that. Like, and I've just been amazed by their resiliency with being willing to just rise up to all the things we kind of threw them into. And even especially my oldest daughter, like in college, was the most mind-blowing one to me. She still struggles academically. We found out like some learning issues, and was already really behind and everything. And so just her willingness to try it, and she's doing it. She's passing her classes and she's on her own. And like, so I think that just inspires me to just never limit myself with what I'm doing. And I get inspired really with how my kids, like, how they love people. I'm always like, all right, we've got a week to go on vacation. Like, where do you want to go? Costa Rica? And they're like, we want to see grandma. And like, so they want to go to like the grandparents' house. I'm like, are you sure? You see them all the time. But like, their favorite thing ever is like family. And that's just beautiful. Like, that's how it should be,
Sarah, we mentioned at the beginning that our hero is George Bailey. We've got a lot of heroes, but we love the example from that movie, It's a Wonderful Life. And really, there's a moment, right? There's a moment. My personal favorite part of that movie. Seems weird talking about that movie as we say goodbye to March and into April, but that's a movie for all seasons, right, Tyler Gould?
Absolutely.
George Bailey's on the bridge and he's crying and he's praying, and he's realized that he had a rich life and he'd kind of thrown it away, and he's seen what the world was like without him, and he, in his prayer, he says, I want to live again, right? I want to live again. And then he realizes that it's all back to normal, and he goes back to that drafty old house, and he goes back to the kids, and he realizes that he's got it pretty good. And then little brother comes in and raises the glass and toasts George Bailey as the richest man in town. And Tyler and I, we love the irony behind that, and we always close this podcast in our time with our guest with that question. So, Sarah, to you, what does it mean to be the richest person in town?
Just like loved by God and loved by people. Well, I think there's nothing deeper or more fulfilling than that. As much as we're kind of focused a lot of times on achievements or what we're doing, I think at the end of the day, those things are what bring us fulfillment. And we all have that God-shaped hole in our heart that we try to fill with other things. But really, yeah, when we're known by God and we can experience his love and we feel the unconditional love of people. Yeah.
Well, I love that. And I am so appreciative of the time that you've given us, Sarah, and for the glimpse into your life. And it's wonderful to get an update on the girls, and it's wonderful to see what you and Ryan are doing and what you will do next. Cannot wait to see what Sara Hall does next. So, in fact, I'm wearing my Keep Going shirt for you. Just thinking whatever you've got, it sounds like you've got some Olympic time trials coming up, maybe in track and field. And we're just hoping that you keep going. You keep going until it's that time for you to hang them up. So congratulations on everything that you've accomplished. Congratulations on the life that you're living. And thanks for letting us in on that tonight.
Thank you, guys. It was great to be here with you.
Thanks, Sarah. It's been a lot of fun. We appreciate your time.
Yeah. Great to see you again.
All right, tell everyone I said hi.
I will. Have a good one.
All right.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good idea, Ernie. A toast to my big brother George, the richest man in town.